Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Leo and Jesse here, and they are the co-founders of Maitri. Welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to see you.
Thanks for having us, Stuart.
Yeah. So, how did you come upon the name of Maitri for your company?
Oh, well, it's just sort of it sort of represents the nature of the social media that we are trying to build. It's really all about facilitating interoperability and bringing people together in a way that's complementary to all the other smaller social media applications. So just the spirit of like open, loving kindness and like sincere friendship.
And so what are you guys building?
So this is a social infrastructure project, and it's a rather large tech stack. But at the highest level, what we're really aspiring to do is to technically enable and then financially incentivize interoperability between different social media applications, and create shared network effects so that we can present a better competitive threat to the monopolies through coordinated cooperative competition.
Beautiful. It just feels so strange to be at the peak end of social media as algorithmic engagement farm, and I'm so tired of it. And I want a future of technology where it's not trying to get me. Like it feels like I'm trying to be gotten, and it feels like Musk has now joined the game. What I loved about Twitter was that it was just dysfunctional enough to allow me to be there and find the lobies and everything like that. But now Musk has gone in there and he's basically done a reorg of the algorithm. I'm happy in some senses, I'm just getting really skeptical of everything that's happening in terms of all the social media companies. So excited
Yeah.
to go for it. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate that kind of chaos magic as well. And that's thematically, that's one of the things that I really like to emphasize is a desire to return people to like the early days of forums and bulletin boards where people came together around points of common interest and found real camaraderie and and forged deep friendships based on those common interests. Instead of as those have given way to like generalized social media feeds, everybody's just sort of shouting into the void, like based only on proximity, omnidirectionally, in a way that like when you're a little child, you play with the kid that's next door. And that's not the best way to interact with people. So thematically, what we're doing is we're trying to steer people back towards smaller groups of people where they can have higher quality interactions based on those common interests. And the most important part of this is facilitating the interoperability that allows them to move seamlessly between those different places, is eliminating that friction. And so the first step that we're taking toward that is called community graphs. That's the first layer of this tech stack. And it's essentially like it's complementary to social graphs. Where social graphs represent our relationships one-to-one, person-to-person, community graphs is adding additional context by better representing the extent of our memberships in groups, as it really is like that is how we form friendships and trust and reputations within the context of the groups that we're a part of. And not just one group, not like a single issue voter, like we all participate in many different groups. And one of the things that we found was that this was insufficiently addressed in this kind of context and the messiness, the fuzziness of membership in groups, especially around the edges. We're not names in a spreadsheet, we're not contained that neatly. And so this was just something that we found a gap in the tooling that we needed to build Maitri, and we found like a broad addressable market for this with a ton of additional use cases, secondary and tertiary benefits that really take some interesting things to scale that we'd love to get into with you today.
Yeah, totally. And I want to get into the interoperability. But before that, I have a philosophical question. What have you learned about the fuzziness of social relationships and how it relates to context? It feels like the last 20 years last 100 years have really been about sort of humans as economic units. And it's just so interesting to go into how that happened. But what have you learned about fuzziness in terms of social relationships and how to quantify someone?
I think
quantify someone.
Yeah, like subjectivity is something that we talk about probably the most often of topics that come up while we're thinking thinking problems through in this design space. And it's something that we should really hold on to instead of like reducing people down to a single social credit score, right? Like things like trust are highly subjective and contextual. And so when we think about use cases for this infrastructure, like we're driven by things like pursuing intersubjective truth based on intersubjective trust, which allows us to kind of like to ride the middle between those two awful things in extremes, which would be like an objective truth, as if that was possible, and post-truth, follow your bliss, right? So if we want to like, one of the use cases that I'm most excited about is talking about like decentralizing scientific journals. And if you want to like allow people to self-publish content and avoid turning that into a popularity contest, you're doing that based largely on reputation. And reputation is, as we were just talking about, highly subjective and contextual. So like the fuzziness of membership in groups is really like highlighted by the subjectivity of, well, which domain, which experts in this area do you defer to based on your perspective? So who we would consider a part of a group is probably very different, even if we know a lot of the same, even if we know a lot of the same people. And that's something that you can either try to design out or design in. And we're very much trying to like build technology that is in service of human goals and intuition, instead of the other way around, which is something we see too much of.
What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, I think to add to that, really, for me, what we've been doing a lot as a society due to social media is self-censoring ourselves, because you post something on Facebook, everyone's going to see it. You post something on Twitter, everyone's going to see it. And what we really need to be is within smaller groups. And we've seen that trend. We've seen people spending more time on Telegram and Discord and so on. But as Jesse was saying, the mapping of these things is a little too binary. Like you're either in a channel or you're out of a channel. You're in a group or you're not in a group. And these are closed off. These are closed off networks. So when you create Telegram groups, that you can't easily port them over to another application, and so that becomes problematic as well. And then, as Jesse was saying, the way that we view who's a member of a group and who's not, these are subjective things as well. Like we don't all have to agree, and so it becomes the challenge and the ultimate solution is to find a way to bring that subjectivity in a way that's an open mapping that could be used by many different applications, and then those can interoperate.
Wow. I love the nuance that you talked about in terms of groups, because it's not like we're in a group or outside of a group. I guess there's a small, in every group, there is a small cohort that is definitely inside of that group. But then it's just so interesting. It's just such a philosophically rich place that I have not explored yet, which is I've thought a lot about in-group and out-group, but I have not thought a lot about the fuzziness between in-groups and out-groups. And so let's take it to the mapping and the interoperability. What do you mean by interoperability?
Yeah, so I'd like to first maybe delineate that between two different parts of this project. So community graphs is the first layer of a rather large tech stack that is ultimately about interoperability. But this part of the project is the only part of it that can really live outside the body on its own. And so community graphs can exist independently. The interoperability part of this project, that is really about like allowing users to move between different social media applications in a way that you could imagine this as sort of like a web browser for native embedded social media applications, or like meta frames, if you're familiar with that Web3 social project. So that's really what that comes down to, is like, this is not a social media application in the sense that like you would use the Maitri social media application. You would use our underlying infrastructure to almost as a transparent utility to facilitate the moving between different social media applications that you would like to have better portability between.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it reminds me a lot of what's going on in crypto more generally in terms of there's just so many things that need to be built. I was trying to purchase a new coin on using Solana. It's not on Coinbase, and I just had to go, I had to transfer Solana from one thing to another. And I think I lost the Solana because I didn't choose the right thing. And it's just like there's like 17 different things I got to read about in order to understand about it. And it's just like,
Mhm.
why this has made it more complicated. This is not, this is, but I don't think crypto was ever about making it less complicated. Crypto does not seem to be about that. But at some point, it's got to be about that.
Right.
And it relates to what you guys are doing is because you're building this invisible infrastructure that allows the interoperability, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that it accomplishes, and this is really this will be a familiar pain point, and it's not the main value proposition of what we're doing, but people love to hear that they'll finally have single sign-on type of simplicity in a way that. And this is the thing I really like to highlight is that single sign-on simplicity doesn't necessarily mean this is your identity, take it around with you everywhere you go, because we're not the same person. We don't represent ourselves the same way in the different contexts with which we engage with people in our personal lives or our professional lives or in our intimate relationships, right? So it's really important to have a single sign-on simplicity in a way that you have like a unique user ID that's never revealed to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can create different personas for the different contexts of the groups that you want to participate in. And that means that identity can exist along a spectrum where you can have fully verified, centrally issued government ID or biometrics, all the way to the other end of the scale where you could be completely anonymous. You could have a range of different pseudonymous identities that could be associated or disassociated from each other, all with granular control at the user level, in a way that you really get to explore something that better balances like privacy and accountability as components of free speech. So think about like how much, as Leo said, people are self-censoring their speech. What kind of things would people like to be able to explore more freely if they didn't have to worry about like who might see something in their social graph, or an interaction that like might come back to haunt them.
Okay, interesting. The privacy and accountability is interesting. So the how does it how is it zero knowledge proof? Is that how you how is it are zero knowledge proofs playing into this at all?
That's definitely one way to accomplish it. There's a couple of different ways that you could have a certain identity like a master user ID, and then you could have pseudonyms that are tied to that, and really they don't just allow the single sign-on and obviously the seamlessness of, hey, these are all my applications in one place, but then we also get into reputation systems, and if you have a certain reputation, the simplest one would be like a unique personhood or proof of humanity kind of reputation, that you're not a bot, right, or that you're not running a duplicate account. That reputation could carry across and be proven against a certain pseudonym without necessarily having to reveal the master ID. And then you can get into all sorts of other reputations
Yeah,
as
so
well.
what do you think about AI? Like I've just particularly after the president recently announced a meme coin, and now it's open season on meme coins. They're
Mm.
just like they're going to be a persistent part of the next few years. And what is that going to do? Well, it's going to turn Twitter into a giant agent-filled network of agents of autonomous agents that
Hmm.
are going to that some you won't be able to tell are humans or not, but some when they're pitching their meme coins, you are definitely going to be noticing that it's a bot. And I've now started to get pitches from AI on meme coins, and it just feels like the internet is going to get destroyed. Like it feels like the internet as we know it is going away. Like there's just no way that it survives the onslaught of AI. Either of you guys, what do you think about this? Do you and how does Maitri play into it?
Yeah, not just pitching you coins, but scamming people and spreading misinformation. You could just imagine a political campaign, like I'm gonna go spin up a million bots and they're going to shill for me. This is all coming. It has been, but it's only going to intensify especially as AI gets more competent at these things and mirroring humans better, and even being better at humans at these things. So, I think when it comes to social media in general, we want some level of AI. They can be very useful and they can be very helpful, but we want a clear identifier. Like, hey, this is a unique person, and this is their only account, master account, right? Or within this application, they don't have two or more accounts. And then this is a bot, right? Or this is a duplicate account or whatever. So we want to have that clear delineation so that we know who we're interacting with.
Wait, do you guys already have that? Can you build that to delineate between, well, I guess, oh, interesting. So with the system where you're mapping it out in the community graphs, you can essentially kind of tell between a bot and a human, or what's the state of the
A little better than kind of. Yeah, this might be a good time to get into that. So essentially what we're doing is we're going back to like PGP era web of trust type of stuff, okay? And the EAS, the Ethereum Attestation Service, released an algorithm back around ECC earlier this year called transitive trust. And this is pulling on the same themes. It's basically saying that if A trusts B and B trusts C, then A can trust C, even if A doesn't know C. Some amount more than 0 and some amount less than 100%, because as you get more distance between A to B to C to D, you have less confidence in I trust who you trust, that they trust, that they trust, that they trust, right? That trust drops off pretty quickly. And so that is at the root of some of what we are working on with community graphs. But we can talk more about that. But to your point or your question, this is just one question that you use to participate in this attestation mechanism that makes up community graphs. But there's an additional checkbox that you can imagine as you're giving attestations to people. Some groups meet online virtually and some groups meet offline in real life, right? And so for any groups that meet in real life, you're able to check a box when it says like, have you met this person in real life? And if you say yes, what that starts to do is that starts to give you a probability of unique personhood. So, and this is going back to the subjectivity, is that everyone, whether you're, gatekeeping a project or, like you're administering something or you're just an individual, everyone can determine where they set the threshold for probability of unique personhood for whatever the use case is at hand. KYC banking, you need like proof of unique personhood. At the other end of the spectrum, you're like, it's not the highest stakes. We can let it slide to have a little bit higher participation, more of a permeable membrane, because it's a lower target. It's not as likely target for abuse.
Yeah. Brilliant. So it sounds like we're building an immune system. It feels like very doomerish right now in the last month, but it feels like the future there is a sort of because I don't know if you guys have studied the work of Nick Land or Deleuze, who is Nick Land's progenitor, and accelerationism is based a lot on Nick Land, and it's very doomerish. Like it doesn't have much space for the human being, and I'm really excited to push back on that because that's basically like I don't like why. What else would you do besides push back on the idea that humans are going away? Because I think humans.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there's not much point to being anything but an optimist, right? Like wake up and do something.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, what do you think about land? Like, what do you? And I was having a great conversation yesterday with a good friend of mine who's from Buenos Aires. Yesterday, he's doing his thesis on luxury in religion and the coinage and all this luxury in like religion and stuff like that. And it's really fascinating stuff. And he knows Deleuze. He knows all these guys. He's read them. He's deconstructed all of them. And I was telling him about my idea for doing Buenos Aires is having an AI group, but being really fundamentally focused on humanism, like a sort of antidote to a lot of what's happened in the technology, where we actually really focus on human connection as this technology gets better and better at doing the work we don't want to do, and even some parts of the creative work that we do like to do, that we can go back to the human. And he said a really potent thing, which is it's not necessarily humanism, but it's more about being, the nature of being, like ontological, the pushing back to that, like what is our most core human aspect, and that's our ability to be, to just be. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. We can go down that philosophical rabbit hole or go back to this idea of immune system and like building an immune system to the threat of non-human aspects of this technology.
No, I think that's right. I was just talking to somebody the other day about, they were worried about, oh, AI is going to eliminate all these jobs. And if we think about, um, most jobs are not things that
Yeah.
we really want to be doing, or things that really promote human connection. Like if you're an accountant, you're spending all your day in spreadsheets and accounting software. Like that's not a better state of existence than hanging out with other people, right? It's true that we need to find meaning in what we're doing, and we need to we need to feel like we're valuable, and we're delivering some kind of purpose. And so it's not like everyone can just be on the beach all day. But I really am optimistic that as AI is able to replace the accounting jobs and the legal jobs, those people can spend time more on human connection and fostering human connection between others. And I think there can be a lot of meaning in that, and it's a better state of existence. So I really do think that if we use AI in the right ways, it can really be a better thing. I don't know. What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually ties back pretty well into the other fork in the road that you offered, which is the immune system, right? And like Leo made the point that we really do want AI to participate in some of these places so that we can benefit from those interactions. ChatGPT went down for a few hours this evening, and people were freaking out. They've already gone past that tipping point of like not wanting to have to do their jobs without it, but what we want to do is to be able to delineate between people and bots in ways that like we can participate in the things that really matter to us more as a matter of choice than necessity. And that immune system is really the thing that says not just between people and bots, but like good actors and bad actors. That's like a different axis to graph this on. You're saying like you can have good bots, you can have bad bots, just like you can have people that are doing good things and bad things. And so when we're talking about like building an identity system that allows you to have like single sign-on simplicity, where you can participate with different personas all the way across the spectrum of verified identity to anonymous. What we're not saying is that you can just do anything without any accountability, because you can still create durable, persistent digital identities and reputations that are built over time, with time being a really important component of that, and focusing on positive reinforcing functions instead of just slashing and negative repercussions for bad actors. And I think that's another really interesting rabbit hole to go down. Is like just the nature of reputation itself, and how that really is the wrapper for all of our relationships within these groups that we form, and how we can really dramatically extend. We can increase the net trust surface area for humanity if we employ trustless technologies to allow people to interact and have like higher trust interactions. So that's really interesting to me, with people and bots.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very good reframe. Let's go into the philosophy of reputation. What's the deal with reputation? How does it work?
Leo, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I love talking about this stuff, but I can kind of kick off from where Jesse left off. The philosophy of it is that the way that we coordinate. Coordination is our most powerful superpower as humans, and the way that we coordinate is generally one of three ways, right? We either use money to I'll pay you to do something and you do it, right? That's a great invention. Or we use the threat of force, right? If you do something, you're going to go to jail. Or we use reputations, right? And I trust you're going to do something because you have a reputation for doing it, right? And so in crypto, we've gotten more advanced at doing more mechanism design around money and money incentives, and we're going to keep exploring that area. But we haven't really advanced the reputation side of like, how do we bring our reputations online and then have those be portable, that we can take with us anywhere in the world, and that it can be much more powerful than the local reputations we have now in our local communities that don't really carry across. Like if I go to Japan right now, I don't have any friends there and any people that can vouch for me there. So I'm starting from a blank slate, completely, right? As opposed to, what if I could go to Japan and I have a reputation for being good at certain skills, or being an expert in certain areas, or just exposing certain values, and living along those values. So I might be in a community that holds certain values here, or several communities that hold certain values here. And then when I go to Japan, other communities that hold the same values will just welcome me in, because it's like I'm kind of part of that same tribe, right? Even though I might not know anyone there, or not even have too many people in common, or be many hops removed, in a social graph. So it becomes really, so then I can go to Japan, I can easily get a job doing something, or I can easily be welcomed into a community and have that human connection, rather than feel like a total tourist, wandering around, and so on. So it can open up the doors to a lot of different things. I don't know if you.
I'd like to just add one thing before we move on, and it kind of goes back to your point about thinking about people as units of economics, as economic units, and that is something we're dealing with, like the hyper financialization of everything, as people are, like Leo mentioned, like mechanism design, that crypto is like everything is targeting like token based governance, specifically because we do not have a way to know who's sitting behind a computer, right? So we don't have persistent, durable digital identity. We don't have robust, scalable reputation systems. And so we have to rely on token-based governance, which leads to some, like predictably suboptimal outcomes, like outcomes that we can essentially pay for if we can afford them. And so establishing identity, durable digital identity, and scalable reputation systems that are highly subjective and contextual allows us to unlock entire new categories of social coordination tools that this is why we can't have nice things. This is the infrastructure that allows us to build a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, it's so cool. I really like that point. There's a lot of things. Oh man. Okay, so reputation. I love the points about money, force, and reputation. That's how we coordinate. There's a global thing, and it reminded me of back in 2010 when Airbnb was kind of getting off the ground, and I was in San Francisco, and I went to Thailand, and I had met somebody at early Airbnb, and they introduced me to somebody in Thailand, and that led to a whole other experience, like a whole beautiful experience, like what Leo was saying about going to Japan, like that existed beforehand. And to a certain extent, it still exists. Like you can do it off book, you can do it out without technology, and it's just sort of through the ways that humans have traditionally done it but with this sort of industrial age, information age sort of complexity. But I really like this idea of building the technology. And while you were talking about the stable identity, of course, the thing that's going off in the back of my head is just like the credit score, right? The dystopian angle of that.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you're not offering the dystopian angle, but I think you have a way of capturing that, right?
Yeah, so let's acknowledge that right up front, is that we are facing some really difficult problems, like hard choices, and you have to choose ultimately, like with social dynamics, you're like, so often we're dealing with things in polarity, sometimes false dichotomies, but like with group dynamics, you're balancing inclusivity and exclusivity, right?
Yeah.
And you can't have both of those things maximally at the same time, and they both have positive and negative attributes to them. And so similarly with this, we have to either adjudicate what is like, we have to determine and then build our biases and preferences into this tooling and say, this is a good way for people to interact and this is a bad way for people to interact, or we have to give people the agency to make bad decisions. And that's kind of what we're facing, because if we build, and we're not building such a robust reputation system, we're building like a narrow reputation primitive. This is like one slice of a ton. It's like a very multifaceted thing, right? So this is one part of a much bigger thing, and they're Legos or an a la carte menu that you can sort of like take from them as you will and interpret them as you see fit. So as long as we build these tools to be composable, and we set out with the idea that like identity and reputation are the two last places we want to have a single source of truth, we build the tooling to empower people and to give them agency, knowing still that like someone is going to just streamline this and say, hey, that's great. You know what we're going to do? We're going to make a grab bag of all these attestations, reduce it down to one score so you don't have to think about it, and we can just spoon feed you. We can spoon feed you easy to digest information. That's gonna happen. That's gonna happen, and that's one of my biggest reservations about this. But similarly, like the other one is, as we're covering our biggest reservations about potentially very impactful projects. The other one is like financializing behaviors that people might engage in anyway, right? And social media is a great example of that, because if we say, well, we have the opportunity to redirect the money flows in social media so that users are able to capture some of the value that they're helping to create. And users create almost all of the value in social media, but they don't get to capture any of it. So we can either share that revenue with them, or we can say, no, we're concerned that this might lead to some bad incentives. And there might be some like sweatshop, click to earn, click farm labor happening. So we're instead going to treat you like college athletes and tell you that it would not be ethical for us to pay you to engage in social media because you're here for an education or you're here to socialize, right? So it's like, do we give people the agency to make bad decisions? And I think that we lean very, very heavily toward free speech and high agency. So that's kind of the state of play. One of the things that we're doing in the case of like financializing behaviors, for example, is that the first platform that we're operating on the interoperability side of our project, we don't have to operate in a manner that needs to be maximally profitable, because we're open sourcing that to encourage competition and grow the network, right? Because we want to steward this larger network. What that means is that we get to set instead some high watermarks for what competitive benchmarking has to surpass, right? Like we'll give you the code base. We want you to come compete with us, but you have to give users at least this much in terms of like what they come to expect, like to be treated well, and to receive commensurate compensation for their contributions to the things that they're participating in. And so if people want to take market share from us, they have to respond competitively to those high watermarks. And so that's really the best that we can hope to do with reputation as well, is to give people highly subjective and contextual reputation kind of primitives, and things that, you brought up ZK, and this is a great example of things where it's like users can finally be more in control of who has access to their data and when and why and for what purposes, instead of just telling them. It's like, it's condescending when they tell us that we own our own data, because the more important question really is, yeah, but who else has access to it? It's a possession is 9/10 of the law type of thing. So it's just it's a big hairy problem, and I have some really serious reservations about that. Leo can probably add some more thoughts if you'd like to talk more about this.
Yeah. I mean, Jesse and I have spent a lot of time worrying about this problem of how do you avoid the Black Mirror social credit score, which China seems to be living out. So, to me, it really is a big concern, and like Jesse was saying, it really is about the primitives and how allowing reputation systems to compete with one another, right? So that you don't have a one size fits all. You're not prescribing that, and if you create the wrong one, everyone's stuck with it, right? We do want accountability. We want to hold people accountable. It's like back in the day, you used to have the traveling snake oil salesman who would go town to town, and he might get arrested in one town, then get released, and he goes to another town and they have no idea, right? So he can just fleece people over and over again. And it is an improvement that we have, criminal records, so that you go to another town and now they know, right? You can't just keep doing the same crime over and over again. So you do want to hold people accountable with reputations, so that they can't just keep doing that over and over again. At the same time, if you what you want to do is you want to create a reputation system that doesn't have a like a winner take all kind of dynamic to it, right? You want to make sure that if you create a reputation system and it gets widely adopted, that it's not sticky, right? Because otherwise everyone's stuck with it because the switching costs to another one are too high. And so what would make these things really sticky is that if you have people rate each other in certain ways, obviously privately they would do so, and then that reputation system gets built on that, and then a new reputation system requires a competing reputation system of that same type requires people to answer all new questions all over again. That creates a lot of friction, right? And now everyone's kind of locked in, just like switching from one social media to another. You got to go recreate your profile and the social graph and so on. But if you're all working off the same community graphs and social graphs, and if you answer a set of questions about someone, and another reputation system can come in and use those same answers to just give different results, and then people can choose which one or the other one. Sorry, go ahead, Jesse.
I just wanted to interject that this is always in ways that are like permissioned and consensual.
Yes. And so yeah, we want to be careful about the privacy side and so on, right? But ultimately, it's like, even if we take the financial credit rating system, in the U.S., instead of it's like you could imagine something being much more subjective. Like people can say who paid you back and who didn't privately, and then you choose who you're trusting on that, and you're getting your own view of someone, of whether you should lend them money or not. And then there's multiple different reputation algorithms that you can choose from, and which one do you like better. So now you don't have a one size fits all. You have competing reputation systems and subjectivity baked into it. So you never end up with one that's like a dystopian and everyone's stuck with, right? You can always have improving ones, and people can choose which ones they want to use.
Really interesting. Okay, there's a lot there to go into. There's one aspect, which is all this. You mentioned the guy with the criminal background check. Like, that was an immune system response of Western civilization to being like, okay, how do we stop this problem of the Wild West? Now we have a Wild West on the internet.
Exactly.
And now we've got crypto, the ability to exchange monetary value between people, but we don't have a reputation, a way of solidifying reputation in the information age. And that feels like you guys are building primitives to allow many different actors to use those primitives to do that in a way that's scalable, but doesn't focus it all in the hands of essentially like like a Facebook.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And there's a really important point to emphasize here, which is like positive versus negative reputations. And so this is the second property of this attestation mechanism, the first being that it's private. And maybe just to cover that before we move on, the importance of private attestation mechanism is that if you look at vouching as something that's like incredibly useful, but it's kind of it's a dull hatchet. It's not like it's not a particularly sharp tool, and so it's something that we can improve on substantially. And that's essentially what we're doing here, is like we're taking vouching private, so that the main problem with vouching is that it's public, right? Because the interested parties need to be known to each other so that there's accountability, but that creates some obvious social pressures that we've all felt, and there's cascading consequences that as a result of that, right? So taking this private is a really big, important first step. The second part is that this attestation mechanism is only positive. So you're not downvoting anybody.
Right.
If you don't give someone an attestation, it's neutral. Like if you imagine that like community graphs is essentially like allowing people to draw circles around all the dots, the nodes on their social graphs that represent the different people that they think of as members of a group, and essentially clustering them to create heat maps and say, these are the people that I think are really participating and contributing to the groups that I'm a part of. And the people that I don't give attestations to, I might not know them, or they're more on the periphery from my perspective. Now, you might be doing the same thing, we're all drawing with crayons on this large social graph, drawing circles around the people that we know, and it's creating this really rich tapestry of like a stack of 3D Venn diagram, right? And that is where you say, now, in the same way that we're only giving positive attestations, like you think about the effectiveness of positive and negative reputations. And one of my favorite examples of this is something that this guy Nick from the HATS protocol shared with me, which is like HATS is like an important component of distributing roles to crypto wallet addresses, which will be really useful for on-chain organizations in the future. Awesome project, great guy. So we were jamming on reputation, and we were talking about the effectiveness, the similar effectiveness, the intuitiveness of that, like positive reputation should be similarly effective to negative reputation. And he's like, yeah, there's a great study that affirmed this like a long time ago, where they basically created a marketplace, a digital marketplace where people were able to sell goods, and they were allowed to lie about the quality of the goods. And basically the variables were that they allowed them to change their usernames or they didn't, and they gave them reputation or they didn't. And so what they found is that if they had one identity and they had to stick with it, the goods came through like as expected right off the bat, because you had an identity attached to it. If people were allowed to change their identity, but there was no reputation, then it was just, it was the worst outcomes expectedly. And when they allowed people to change their identity, but they accumulated only positive reputation over time for being good merchants, then it started out with some fraud, but very quickly it escalated to like being nearly on par with the durable identity that people had in the first example that I gave. So that's just one example. And the counterpoint to that is that it's like just the difficulty, just pragmatically, the difficulty of burdening someone, branding them with that scarlet letter or the albatross around their neck, and expecting them to carry that identity forward on the internet. Like, it's a wallet. They drop it at the first opportunity, like spin up a new address. But then the absence of a positive reputation becomes a questionable thing, in a way that you're like, well, wait a second, where have you been? It's sort of like a big gap in your resume. It's like, what were you doing for the last 5 years? So if someone doesn't have any positive attestations in the context that matters to you for the thing that you need to consider at that time, that's something that you could weigh negatively without having to give negative attestations.
So there are markers, there's like digital exhaust basically that can be used as the negative markers, but without specifically going into the negative markers. There's one quick kind of plug back into that civilizational level immune system for identity, like similar to criminal records, is that in the United States, there was this fundamental thing that was built there where people could change their identity. They could change their name. They could go into the bureaucracy and change their name. I'm sure there's some reason for it, which I don't know. But that's an interesting kind of just like philosophical angle. But the thing I'm more interested in talking about with both of you is where you think we're going in the future. So I'm a big student of media. I love studying what happened with the printing press and then the radio and then the TV. And you have, the printing press was more distributed, more decentralized in the way that the internet is, but it was only text. And then once you got the voice on the radio, then you have these people able to really mesmerize crowds. in this one-to-many direction, and then the TV just made that crazier. And then now that's all gone. It's like the TV is gone. Like the one-to-many aspect of the TV is gone. The here is the attention.
It's funny that you're saying that when you have a TV next to your head.
Yeah, well, yeah. The TV, but the ability to
I get exactly what you mean. Yeah.
the synchronous one-to-many. Everybody watches Seinfeld on Monday nights in the 90s, and everybody's there, and everybody can talk about that. That's going away. Like that's no longer there. You now have somebody like Elon Musk who can capture attention asynchronously, sometimes synchronously, but and people do talk about him like the sort of Seinfeld episode. But in 5 years, will that be the same thing? What do you guys think about the future, where we're headed, where we have many-to-many connections, all the infrastructure you guys are building, all of the crypto stuff, all of the AI stuff? Like, what does it do to the human species in our ability to navigate group identity?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and yeah, you're right. It's kind of become a shared culture now to be seeing what Elon Musk is posting or what's the popular thing on Twitter. But I don't think that's best. I mean, obviously the centralization of political power, that's the thing that really motivated me and Jesse to even start Maitri, is seeing where this ship was heading, and how we need to decentralize social media to avert some very, very dangerous things. But when I think about, like, analogy here is music, right? When music in the 60s and 70s, everyone was listening to the same songs, and nowadays it's like we're all listening to different music. Like you don't really have that shared song that everyone's listening to. Even if maybe there's some popular artists, but even then it's not the level of popularity of, like, or commonality that was exactly. And so I think we're better. I think we're better for it. Like something got lost along the way. Like we don't have that shared moment as a society. But music is so much better these days, right? And that'll upset some people who really love the oldies. But it's so much richer, and I would much rather have the selection and the quality of music that we have today than be listening to the same songs over and over again.
I think that really kind of builds on what we were just talking about, the in-groups and out-groups. I mean, when culture was more homogenous, I imagine that many more people were feeling a bit left out of that larger in-group, right? But as we have more optionality, like all of the categories are so much more vibrant, right? And accelerating at like unimaginable speeds, and in really positive directions mostly. When I anticipate like the next step is really an acceleration of curation to catch up to the increase in content, right? And that's going to be the new artistry and the new kind of like finding their groups, finding their tribes, finding their common interests and culture through shared curation, because the abundance of content is just like is going to be a massive problem. So I agree with Leo completely. I mean, I think we're super well aligned on this kind of stuff. A lot like a married couple gets to be after years and years of knowing what each other thinks on any given topic. This is something that we spend a lot of time talking about. But yeah, it's like there's something lost, but I think that we're all a lot better off for it. Kind of like in the way that they talk about kids' shorter attention spans, but also there's like some interesting things about their ability to like respond to, like, they're highly adaptable and able to context switch in ways that like older generations of people haven't been. So does that equip them better for the future that's coming? I don't know. Things are changing, and I'm not that upset about this part of it.
Well, I do think about that as a parent, but at the same time, I've noticed myself, my attention span has been shortening as I've gotten older, right? I think we can all, and if I try to go back now and watch The Godfather, it's like so slow. But I used to have more of attention span for that. But I wouldn't trade it. I actually like that I have a shorter attention span now, and I enjoy listening to podcasts at 1.5x or 2x or whatever, and it's actually life's kind of a little bit more interesting, I think, and there's just it's richer. Like So I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing that our attention spans are shortening.
It just is, right? There is no should, because I've been thinking a lot,
Right.
particularly the last few days, where it's just like we're here now. We're in the age of acceleration. It's
Right.
not slowing down. Nobody can take control of it. It's out. Like
Right.
Pandora's box is open, and we just have to learn how to work with what is rather than what we may want. The attention thing is so interesting for me because I see the potential in LLMs. I'm really involved in the AI space so that I can build the future that I've wanted, that I feel like I've sort of missed out on since the 90s, because decoupling the productivity from the internet feels really important for me. There's the entertainment of the internet, which I don't mind entertainment, but also interesting thing I learned recently is that the Amish, all the Amish, they all make their decisions on what technology they'll use based on the group meetings and this sort of like scripture that they use, that the community decides where the limits are. But pretty much all
Hmm.
of them agree, particularly in the old school version of Amish, that entertainment is the one thing that they don't use technology for. So they retain that entertainment from the group aspect, from the group together, singing songs and doing all the stuff that groups have
Hmm.
been doing. But anything productive, they're like, yeah, we can use technology for that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that
I
was the
didn't
delineation
know
for them.
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so this divergence question, I got something new from you guys, which is that it's the like the people who in the 1960s who were fed up with the monoculture of the music were probably highly divergent. And I'd imagine that all three of us are probably highly divergent, and that population, that is going to be the very interesting thing to see what happens in the age of acceleration.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there is this sort of normie thing, and I don't mean to be. I think normies essentially do serve a really important purpose for civilization, but that's going to change pretty drastically over the next 5 years, I think. The last 10 minutes, do you guys have anything to say on this?
Yeah, maybe just on that point, I think there's something more optimistic hidden in like the AI agents and the onslaught of fraud and fuckery that's going to be coming at us, which is that like in the same way that porn drives technology on the internet historically, and like crypto has been a bunch of scams and degenerate gambling casinos, and if like look at the underlying value proposition of the technology that NFTs
Oh,
turned into overpriced JPEGs that you can Ponzi into cash. And it's like failing to deliver on the promises in the first hype wave of anything is probably not a good representation of the enduring value of a technology. And, what are the second and third order effects of these things? And it's like, these agents that are like, hey, it's got its own treasury and it can engage in crypto transactions and it can it can scam you all on its own and nobody's accountable for it. I mean, there will be like many beneficial uses to these things that come out of that, but like it's a frontier technology and industry, and like of course those types of people are driven toward those opportunities. But I'm a lot more optimistic for some of the beneficial things that will come in follow-on waves.
what do you think, Leo?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, we're probably all familiar with Moloch, and whoever in the audience might not be. The idea is that the biggest evil humanity faces is failure to coordinate, right? And that manifests itself in many different ways. But it's like, when you install a dictator, now you're stuck. But if everybody could just coordinate, they would easily overthrow that dictator, but they can't, right? So there's just over and over again, you run into coordination failures in different ways, and our improving our ability to coordinate both financially with crypto and reputation systems. I think will go a long way towards making better decisions as groups and working toward better goals. AI is a huge productivity improvement, but AI can help us build more bullets, or it can help us make more art and music. And we need to be solving the coordination and governance game at the same time so that we can use it toward better things rather than worse things. So I think that the two really build off of one another and require one another.
What do you think, Leo, about what prevents most humans from coordinating together?
It's several different things, but sometimes it's a misalignment of incentives, right? war is a common one there, right? Because what you're doing is, when you're invading another country, bombing another country, you don't feel the pain. There's an externality there, a big externality that's not internalized back to you until they invade you, right? And then after a few years, everyone realizes, oh wow, this was really painful for everyone. We should probably stop. But it's making those mistakes over and over again because of a misalignment of incentives. Another one is an inability to communicate, right? And I gave the dictatorship example earlier, but it's like if everyone in Russia could start freely talking to one another, if they have free speech, they would be able to communicate and organize a revolt pretty easily. That's why dictators always censor everything, and they use a lot of propaganda. So there's a few different things there. There's a lack of coordination tools, right? That it's like how do you get everyone to actually get on the same page and coordinate, and that can be done in different ways. But a financial one is like, hey, everyone, stick some money into the smart contract, and you're committing to do this thing at a certain time, and if it hits a certain amount of money, now everyone's going to do it. Otherwise, everyone gets their money back. But you can also have a reputation version of that. Everyone stake your reputation that you're going to do this thing at a certain time, and if you get enough people to commit to it, then we all do the thing. So there's different tools that can be built that way. So those are just some of the things that I think can be improved upon.
Yeah, very interesting. Anything else, Jesse, to add on there?
No, I think that's been a real fun conversation. Thanks for having us on for a talk with you.
How can listeners find out more about Maitri?
You can go to maitri.network. That's MAITRI.network.
Cool. Thank you so much.